Chapter 11, Muscular System, Axial and Appendicular Muscles, Part 2. All right, so muscles involved in speech. Well, some of the other muscles we talked about would be involved to some degree, but these muscles are important for moving structures specific to speech. So, for instance, we have the glosses. They all move the tongue, glossus for tongue. So we have genioglossus. Genioglossus goes from the mandible to underneath the tongue. We have hyoglossus. Hyoglossus goes from the hyoid bone up to the tongue. And then styloglossus. Styloglossus goes from the styloid process, the temporal bone, to the back of the tongue. You'll note I wrote out their origins and insertions. That's because you have to know their origins and insertions. So, genioglossus. Genioglossus protracts the tongue, pulls it forward. Styloglossus. Styloglossus helps to elevate and retract the tongue, so pull it up and back. And hyoglossus helps to depress and retract the tongue, pull it down and pull it back. So again, if you remember that the only thing muscles do is get shorter, it helps give you an idea of what is going to happen. All right, then we have muscles going to the hyoid bone. So we got stylohyoid going from the styloid process, the temporal bone, down to the hyoid bone. We have geniohyoid going from the mandible to the hyoid bone. So, stylohyoid, when it contracts, elevates the hyoid bone. And geniohyoid, when it contracts, helps to elevate the hyoid bone. And this is important for doing different things when we're speaking. So I don't expect you to say, oh, this makes the bloop-a-doop sound. No, this raises the hyoid bone, which raises the larynx. All right, sternohyoid. Sternohyoid going from the sternum up to the hyoid bone. Omohyoid, much more interesting. Omohyoid goes from the scapula to the hyoid bone. Pretty weird. They are not written out over here, so you don't need to know them, but I mentioned it anyway. So, sternohyoid will depress or pull down the hyoid bone, thereby depressing the larynx. Omohyoid also depresses the hyoid bone, depressing the larynx. All right, then we have the sternothyroid muscle going from the sternum to the thyroid cartilage, way down here. And the thyrohyoid muscle going from the thyroid cartilage to the hyoid bone. The sternothyroid is going to depress the thyroid cartilage of the larynx. Depress the thyroid cartilage of the larynx. The thyrohyoid bone elevates the thyroid cartilage, which thereby elevates the larynx. But it also has an RMA. RMA means reverse muscle action. So the thyrohyoid muscle can actually switch what is the origin and what is the insertion. So it can both elevate the thyroid cartilage up or depress the hyoid bone down. Pretty cool. Continuing muscles related to speech, we have the digastric muscle. Digastric muscles going from the temporal bone down under, does a little U-turn and then inserts into the mandible. It's considered to have two bellies because of where it has to make that U-turn is connective tissue, and that thereby is why it's called digastric. Digastric, two bellies, and it can contract to elevate the hyoid bone, or it can do reverse muscle action and depress, pull down the mandible, which could also go back to mastication. And then we have the mylohyoid muscle. Mylohyoid at the very floor of the jaw, and it goes from the mandible to the hyoid bone. Mylohyoid elevates the hyoid bone and elevates the floor of the mouth. So mylohyoid, way down at the bottom, elevates the hyoid bone and also elevates the floor of the mouth. All right, moving on to muscles that move the head. We have the sternocleidomastoid muscle, going from the mastoid process temporal bone down to the sternum and clavicle. We have one on each side. And this muscle, when both of them contract at the same time, so when right and left sternocleidomastoids contract, you will flex the cervical vertebra, which lets you flex the head so that you're looking down. So straight up, contract it, flex to look more down. Now, if only one of them contracted, they will rotate the head in the opposite direction they're located. So if this one contracted, the head would go the other direction, opposite direction it is. And also it could laterally flex the head, which would basically means that you helps you rest the head on your shoulder. So you could laterally bend the head, flexing it at the neck to rest it on your shoulder. All right, we have these two lovely muscles. We have splenius capitis going from the vertebra up to the temporal bone. We have semispinalis capitis going from the vertebra up to the occipital bone. Splenius capitis here and here will, when acting together, extend the head and neck, so pull the head back so you can look up. Singly, if it's just one, it can help rotate the head to the same side. So this one's on this side, so it would turn the head in this direction. Semispinalis capitis, together it helps to extend the head and neck. Singly, it will laterally flex the head or neck, so help to let you rest your head on your shoulder. All right, muscles that move the vertebral column. We have the scalenes, anterior scalene, middle scalene, and posterior scalene. 1, 2, 3. And they all do the same thing. Their actions is to elevate the first and second ribs when we're breathing in really deep. So if you try to breathe in as hard as you can, these three muscles will contract, elevating ribs 1 and 2, increasing the volume in the thoracic cavity. And they have a reverse muscle action. So these three muscles could contract. When they contract, they can help to flex the neck, help to basically allow you to look down. So they could work with the sternocleidomastoid muscles on that. All right, in our back, we have a group of muscles called the erector spinae. This is a muscle group, multiple muscles. There's 2 sets of them on either side of the vertebra. So here they are again, one on each side of the vertebral column. And then we also have quadratus lumborum. It is going from the hip bones up to the vertebra, as you can see here, from the hip bones up to the vertebra. The quadratus lumborum helps to extend the vertebral column. So if you're, say, bowing, bending over, then they can contract to help to raise, to straighten the vertebral column. And if only one of the 2 quadratus lumborums contract, it will let you laterally flex your vertebral column, lean over to one side. Then we have the erector spinae muscle groups. When both muscle groups contract at the same time, it allows you to extend the vertebral column, allows you to, again, if you're already bent over, to straighten up and stand up straight and tall. They also are important for maintaining posture. And if only one side contracts, then that would help you to laterally flex the vertebral column, to bend over to one side, as it were. All right. Moving on to the muscles for breathing. Well, a big one is the diaphragm. Here is part of the diaphragm. The diaphragm is sort of a bowl-shaped muscle, curved as you can see it, directly under the lungs, separating the abdominal cavity from the thoracic cavity. When the diaphragm contracts, it actually pulls down and flattens out. So this bowl-like muscle will pull down, flatten out, and by doing that, it expands the thoracic cavity. It pulls the lungs down. This will allow the air to come in during inspiration when we breathe in, and it also increases pressure on the organs in the abdominal pelvic cavity. But primarily, breathing is the important function for the diaphragm. The diaphragm's origin is quite big because, again, it's all the way around. It goes around the circumference of the inside of the trunk of the body. So it goes from the inferior surfaces of the ribs, around the costal cartilage, over some of the lumbar vertebrae, all the way back around. So again, looking at this, if you see something asking about a muscle going in sort of a circle around the inside of the trunk of the body, then it's the diaphragm's origin we're talking about. The insertion for the origin is the central tendon. Central tendon is in the center of the diaphragm. So it's this tendon that's acting, that's being pulled on and pulled down to flatten out the muscle. All right, we also have the intercostal muscles. These are muscles between the ribs. We have the external intercostals, which are more superficial, closer to the surface. They elevate ribs when we breathe, both during regular breathing in and when we do forced inspiration. Basically, their origin is the inferior border of the superior rib, and their insertion is the superior border of the inferior rib. So here's the origin, there's the insertion. And so when they contract, they elevate, they raise up the inferior rib. Then we have the internal intercostals. They are deeper, further away from the surface. The internal intercostals have the opposite function. They depress the ribs, and they function primarily during forced expiration, when you're trying to breathe out hard to get lots of air out quickly. So their origin and insertion are the reversed. So their origin is the superior border of the inferior rib, superior border of the inferior rib. Their insertion is the inferior border of the superior rib, so that when they contract, they pull down on the superior rib, compressing the thoracic cage, allowing us to breathe out faster. All right, we also have two other muscles. We have serratus posterior inferior, as shown here. They depress ribs during forced expiration. So they depress the ribs to allow us to breathe out faster and harder. And then we have serratus posterior superior, and they elevate the ribs during forced inspiration. So they help to expand the thoracic cage when we try to breathe in as hard as possible. All right, muscles of the abdominal wall. Well, we have toward the surface of the abdominal wall, we have the rectus abdominis muscles, two of them running side by side. Their origin is in the superior surface of the pubis, so of the hip bone, and they insert into the xiphoid process of the sternum and inferior surfaces of ribs 5 through 7. And then we also have the external obliques on either side, on the lateral sides. Their origins, the external and inferior borders of rib 8. And their insertion is the linea albina, which is the sheet of connective tissue right here down the midline, as well as the iliac crest of the os coxae. So rectus abdominis, when it contracts, it can flex the vertebral column, allow you to bend over to bow, and also compresses the abdomen. The external obliques, one on each side, they together, acting together, can compress the abdomen and help you flex the vertebral column. So when they act together, the same as rectus abdominis. But when only one acts, they cause the vertebral column to laterally flex, to let you lean over to one side, or to rotate the vertebral column, to let you twist the trunk of your body. Now, here again is rectus abdominis, one muscle. Here's the other one. Here's the external oblique. It turns out the rectus abdominis, we get the six-pack because there's these little bits of connective tissue that go along its width called the tendinous intersections. So there's little to no muscle tissue there, so we only see the bulges in between the tendinous intersections, allowing the people who work out a lot to get the six-pack. We have linea albina. This is a thick sheet of connective tissue running down the midline. It is formed by the aponeuroses of the external, internal, and obliques and the transverse abdominis. So sheets of connective tissue that are connecting the obliques to the linea albina also help to form it. We have the rectus sheath, which is a sheet of connective tissue going around the rectus muscle specifically, also formed from the aponeuroses of external, internal, obliques, and transverse abdominis. And then finally, at the border, we have the inguinal ligament at this inferior border, and that also has a little space of its own. And this is formed by the inferior edge of the external oblique aponeuroses. An aponeurose is a sheet of connective tissue that's acting as a tendon for these thin sheet-like muscles. And that's where we'll stop for right now.